Okay, guys. Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 202, which is our Christmas special. All right, sorry about that, guys. I will get used to this. It's a new system I'm trying this evening. Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 202, which is our Christmas special, and also is going to be our last stream until the new year. We're going to take a break next week to give people a chance to be with their families and do all that Christmas stuff. As always, I'm going to start us off with a tune, which I hope this week will work properly. So here we go.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom, to close
And there we go. I think we've solved our intro music problem. So, yeah, I'm quite pleased about that. So, excellent, guys. And I've never had much problem with the outro song anyway. So, touch wood, that will go well. Okay. I believe Ataman's going to join us in due course. I certainly hope so. And I have also invited Hitman, who's been a regular for the last few weeks. But it is Christmas time. Some people have Christmas parties and what have you. So who knows? We will see who turns up. As always, I'm going to ask our guests if they have a first subject for this evening. I'm going to start with Mitch. Mitch, did you have a first subject for this evening?
Mine's like the most confusing one ever, way. This Magdeburg Christmas market massacre, for lack of a better way of expressing it, and in particular the perpetrator, by the looks of it, whose profile is probably one of the most confusing that argument that I'm seen and looked at. Like any one of us will say, we've looked at for the past 20 years of such similar terror attacks. With cars driving into Christmas markets, which of course is usually an Islamist tactic like ISIS have done in the past. But this perpetrator, completely weird, strange, just everything just about it, just weird.
Can I just say one thing to you, Mitch? That what occurred to me when I was looking at this attack, I mean, first of all, I would wonder how truly ex-Muslim he was, given he drove into a load of mostly Christian families doing Christmas shopping. But also, if you look at Syria, you have all these ex-Al Qaeda and ISIS guys who are now all supposedly, in inverted commas and air quotes, reformed, who have chucked Assad out, who is now in Russia, of course, and who the West, including America and Britain, are supporting. So, there's these supposedly reformed jihadis. There seems to be a bit of a parallel between what's going on in Syria and like Starmer, who is freezing British pensioners to death, is quite happy to give ex-jihadis or supposedly ex-jihadis in Syria large amounts of British taxpayers' money. So there we go. But
yeah, there's a
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, mate. It's just something that struck me as a bit of a parallel.
Yeah, there's a guy I know on Twitter who said he reckons that this supposed Saudi national isn't actually the real perpetrator, and he reckons someone from HTS, like that jihadi organization over in Syria, the perpetrator could be, for argument's sake, linked to them, and that this is all a cover-up, like what happened with Southport. Now, I don't find that likely because, I mean, like they called the perpetrator apparently an hour or two after the attack, so it's a bit too quick for them to do a cover-up in that way. But I mean, I'm looking at this one, the entire profile that we've been told about the perpetrator, nothing about it makes sense from a logical perspective, unless you go down a rabbit hole of this guy is a schizo. But that's just convenient for the powers that be, because they always claim that every time there's a terror attack, mental health issues or whatever.
Yep, that's the normal excuse and has been for a couple of years now, more than a couple of years. I think, as I said on the Discord, the fact that this guy was supposedly a feminist activist and a Judeo-Christian, whatever the hell that means, those should have been red flags if you ask me. But I mean,
I think Bovril on Twitter say best. Like, this guy is practically the ideal migrant that the Civnat crowd, like Douglas Murray and Tommy Robinson and all these others, want, oh, well, this guy is a liberal, he's an atheist. He's basically got the same views as someone like Richard Dawkins about something like Islam. Therefore,
it's full on the accelerator.
Yeah, it's so this then beggars. I mean, then beggars people to start thinking, okay, that while this is just a really advanced case of taqiyya, which is taqiyya, of course, being the Islamic, being the Arabic word for deception, because I mean, I believe in Quran, I can't remember what section it was, but it's generally said that you're allowed to deceive non-Muslims.
Non-Muslims, yeah, non-Muslims.
Advances the cause of Islam. So, if you're going to practice jihad by running over a bunch of children at a Christmas market, then you're allowed to lie under Islamic scripture. The main problem with that is this guy was saying the same stuff a few months ago as he was saying back in 2016. So, what's probably could be more likely, let's say hypothetically, something like the guy spent so much time being anti-Islam, but then he just got isolated because, of course, the problem, because this is often occurrence with ex-Muslims who follow the same route as Ayaan Hirsi Ali. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali, while she adjusted fairly well, she married him and does all right for herself. Others who try to de-Islamify, get her mental health issues because they're trying to assimilate into Western society, which is massively different from anything that, let's say, Pakistan or Saudi Arabia are like. And in their mental health issues, they revert back to their Islamic upbringing, which leads to them basically doing the same stuff as what ISIS would do.
Yeah, could well be. I don't disagree with you at all, Mitch. My question is, why are these people invited here in the first place? Whether they're good at assimilating or not good at assimilating, don't invite them and it won't happen.
Yeah, that's the main lesson to that's the main thing. But our some of his shit libs, like that Dan Hodge or whatever his name is, he's unwittingly verifying the stuff we say when he's saying, "Oh, well, this guy fulfills the same standards of what Tommy Robinson would want of these kind of people," and it's like the thing is, well, so you've got this my immigrant fella who basically ticks all the boxes that all the Civnat crowd want, and yet he still perpetrates something as disgusting as this. It kind of tells you that assimilation could never happen, and therefore we're the ones being vindicated by all this because it's not Islam; it's a fact that they're just foreigners to begin with.
No, absolutely, Mitch. I mean, look, my point is this. I mean, I don't want immigration, full stop. I mean, if someone wants to come to Britain, say, from Australia or America or Canada or New Zealand, or even South Africa, if they're a white guy, I got no problem with that, or to any of those countries. But why would we invite people in who are alien to our people? Whatever their views are, I just don't think we should.
Yeah, I just don't see how. I'm looking at this perpetrator. This, I mean, apparently they deleted his Twitter profile because apparently he praised Elon Musk not so long ago because apparently this guy supported the AfD in Germany as well. If you go off his Twitter, which makes it even weirder.
Let's press F to doubt that one, mate. But okay.
Yeah, apparently, apparently, I think it was like a few weeks ago, or I don't know if it was a few years ago. I can't remember how, but there's a tweet from him that says like, "Oh yeah, he's hating ethnic Germans because he sees them as having allowed Islam to Islamicize in Europe. Particularly, he hates Angela Merkel because, of course, Angela Merkel, she's the main reason why there's so many Muslims in Germany. But he just wants to take out But according to one post, he blames Germany, as in the German people, for allowing Islam such a, I won't say dominant, but prominent place in European society. And apparently that's one vector of trying to piece together why he did this, given, as I said, could we you've got the BND, which is like the German version of the CIA. They've been surveilling AfD for years. Like Björn Höcke, who was in charge of the Thuringen section of AfD.
It could be very convenient, Mitch, for these people, couldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll work as much though, because as someone said on Twitter, the thing is, AFD, they've been put on a spotlight by Elon Musk. So if Germany were to ban the AFD, Trump will cause a huge stir about it, I imagine, because
Let's hope
Musk
so.
will tell him this is. Yeah, it's funny how 12 hours before this attack happened, Elon Musk was basically saying the AFD are the last hope for Germany. I mean, literally at the same time this terror attack was happening, you had Rory Stewart and Hamza Yusuf who were saying, "Oh, isn't it terrible that Elon Musk is saying this about the AFD in Germany?"
Yeah,
And
well,
then this terror attack has just
let's be clear, Mitch, that Rory Stewart and Humzef, the Muslim in a kilt from Scotland, are two of the worst people in Britain. But okay.
Yeah. I don't know if Aaron's got anything to say, because I've been.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Aaron what his take was on this stuff.
When it comes to the man himself who committed the attack, from what I've seen, one of his tweets, there was a screenshot going around saying that he was complaining about the fact that Germany was letting in too many Muslims, refugees, and not enough ex-Muslims, and that in the same screenshot he said Germany will pay. And there was, and also that I'm not that. That there's a thing that if he is a proper ex-Muslim, him being anti-Christian might not necessarily be inconsistent, because he could be viscerally anti-religious. This could be a secular terrorist attack.
Yeah, he could be a dyed-in-the-wool atheist, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
When it comes to the AFD, I'm skeptical of the idea that it was somehow, this might have been planned or anything like that. I think this is just people in the media just using it as being an event that happened, and they're just going to try and use it against the AFD.
Yeah, I mean, basically anything that happens is used against the right. I mean, by the mainstream media. Absolutely, 100%, Aaron. You're quite correct about that. Yeah, Mitch, what's your wrap up on this idea?
I said earlier, there's just nothing about this profile we've been told that I just find believable. Like this idea that an AFD supporting basically secular Richard Dawkins type of Saudi is somehow so incensed about the spread of Islam in Europe that he decides to attack a Christmas market full of people who are the exact opposite of the ideas that he claims to have a visceral hatred of. Like, for example, that Christmas market isn't going to be full of people who, well, perhaps some of them might have voted Angela Merkel. I don't know, but I mean, how are you? But it's not really something to do if you hate Angela Merkel to run down a bunch of Germans in a Christmas market. So
yeah, a load of families doing their Christmas shopping is kind of, it's kind of the hallmark of like the Islamic State or those sorts of people, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just going to be seen as a means of piling on the pressure, because the thing was you had Björn Höcke, who and his faction called the Flügel, which I think it translates as the Eagle faction, which they're called the Eagle basically because of a Prussian eagle. They're seen as guys who, because for example, they get bollocking because they say some revisionist stuff about World War II or that certain period of mustache man back in German history, or they'll spend their time saying, "Oh well, the best time of German history was when we weren't democratic, back when we were under the Kaiser," and so on. So it's like,
well, the Kaiser was not a particularly bad guy. I mean, let's be fair, he wasn't. He wasn't the brightest tool in the shed, but he wasn't an evil man.
That faction in the end they had to disband because they were being surveilled by the BND, the spy service, and but I think Björn Höcke himself, he's a member of parliament in Thuringen, so I think he's got parliamentary immunity, if I could be wrong. But yeah, you got people in the AFD who are a lot more right wing than the system is willing to tolerate. So they're vested interest in the federal institutions in Germany who want the AFD banned. However,
we've all seen
because
this over the past few months that they're trying to make moves to ban the AFD, which kind of makes a complete mockery of the idea of democracy, of course. But okay.
yeah, because it's like German, because in the constitution or what they call the basic law, ever since Adenauer, they've been using it to ban basically any party they see as quote unquote anti-democratic or party that seeks to replicate the NSDAP under Mustache Man. So,
but the AFD are nothing like that, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, their leader is a woman called Alice Weidel, who she's a lesbian whose girlfriend is I don't know what nationality she's, but she's not European. Like she's ethnically, she's not basically, so Alice Weidel is basically a race mixing lesbian who lives in Switzerland to avoid taxes. So she's not even like that.
I can't see them getting on too well with Moustache Man's lot, but okay.
Yeah, but then as I say, you got Björn Hooker of in Thuringen and his lot of the party. Look, and one thing about Björn Hooker, right, and this is one thing that absolutely terrifies the German establishment. One, there are elements of the special forces, especially they keep having to disband their special forces every 6 months or something because they always find out some guys in the special services are a lot more supportive of Björn Hooker and that kind of sphere. Because of course, naturally, special forces types they're going to be right wing, like the army. And then you've got also a lot of Zoomers in Germany are supporting the AFD. So,
oh yeah, they were the guys singing that song that became very popular, weren't they?
Yeah, Ausländer aus.
Exactly. But I mean, so far as I understood it, that faction of the AFD that likes the eagle were more imperial Germany under the Kaiser than they were like mid-century Moustache Man guys,
Yeah, I think like the most controversial statement I've said was Björn Hooker back in 2017. He was saying, we have to get rid of these memorials of shame. He was, of course, referring to these Holocaust memorials and museums and whatnot. And that comment invited a massive media shitstorm because, of course, because of course the Germans, because of the stuff they did in World War II, they get browbeaten with stuff even harsher than us.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because. Yeah, which is ridiculous. Well, exactly. But I mean, in Germany in particular, like there's almost no one left who was alive in those times,
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I'll pass over to Atman.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Armand, you can hear we've been talking about this Christmas market attack, and what's your takes on this?
Oh yeah, what a minefield. I mean, people were saying that he's an AFD supporter, but from what I read, it wasn't. Like all he said was that him and the AFD had the same enemy, but that doesn't really sound like an endorsement. Someone in any political sphere could have said that from any other angle. People on the right often say that like them and the radical left have the same enemy, even though they obviously are coming at it from two vastly different sides of the coin.
100%.
People directly within our sphere say that like us and the Islamists have the same enemy. So
in some cases, that's right. Doesn't make us the same though.
Yeah. He also seemed to be a Zionist, which was, it's a bit weird. There was another pair of tweets that he made. I'll read them out actually, which are a bit odd. He said, my fellow Saudi ex-Muslims ask me, do you have to announce leaving Islam on Twitter to get asylum in Western countries? And then he goes on to say, Muhammad has destroyed the capacity of reasoning in Muslims. If a Muslim turns to atheist, he might still fail in extracting principles. So, he's like, oh yeah, like even if we become atheists or secular, we're still, we're still going to be retarded, basically.
Yeah, what I said before you joined us, and my deal is none of these people should be invited into our countries.
Yeah.
Whether they're atheists or Islamists or whatever, we shouldn't invite any of them.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
because they don't assimilate. You know.
Yeah, like this is the thing. Like I mean, you had this as well. I mean, people surely remember that stabbing of those young girls in Ireland earlier in the year, much earlier in the year.
Yeah.
We talked about it on this show. And like at the time, the Irish media was saying, "Oh, but he's been here since 2006, so it's not a problem of immigration, or 2002, or however long that guy had been here, been there." And it's like, and we see it again now. You know, people who should be integrated have had all the opportunities to integrate, if integration was a real thing, who are literally by their standards the ideal immigrant, and they still fail the shit test. You know, we had the Rudder-Cabana guy,
Southport.
Yeah,
Southport, exactly.
I mean, he was born here, and oddly enough, in the same way that the Southport stabber was featured on the BBC, this guy was also featured on the BBC.
What a surprise!
You know, and I suppose that's because they're so desperate for the sort of like model immigrant story all the time, or that you know, they sort of just hoover these people up, but they just seem to be so offensively moronic that they just don't see this as a failure of their own ideology. They're incapable of. They're just like, oh, but actually these are the immigrants we want. It's like, well, clearly not. You know, get some self-awareness. But I don't know. So like everyone, like from the squirrel chief himself, Sundar Katwala, to Joel Berry, the Babylon Bee guy, to just all sorts of people have been just coming out of the woodwork trying to proclaim that actually, like, this is somehow still a failure of our side, even though we predict this over and over and over again. But actually, seemingly, this guy's far right. It's the same as you see this thing with the Israel stuff, right? So you get like the Zionists who say the West has to take in Palestinians because we don't want them here. And then the anti-Zionists are like, the West has to take in Palestinians because they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't have to suffer under them. And
exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, and then you're told constantly that, oh, but these are different things. You know, these are different people. You know, you have to understand that you're actually with whichever bad group it is I don't like. And it's like, right, but both of these outcomes lead to are the same for us, which is that we're undermined. And it's like, and now we have this situation where it's like, whether we acknowledge that he's Islamic or anti-Islamic, it doesn't actually matter, because the same modus operandi, which is that it's a foreigner killing Europeans in Europe. But somehow
someone from a totally alien culture. It's someone from a totally alien culture invited to Europe. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, clearly the case is here is that he's probably a little deranged, probably a little screwy in the head, and he's lashing out. And of course, naturally, he's had to warp that in his own mind into and around his group preferences, which is his group, brown people good and non-brown people bad. That's why he ends up with all these weird things where he pretends that, like, in his head, that the German state is like persecuting Saudi refugees and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's Saudi atheists or being persecuted by the Germans. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I know Aaron has said he's doing something at the minute. So, Armin, did you have a first topic you wanted to bring up this evening?
Well, I mean, there's been lots of things I've been thinking about over the week, but it's all kind of been.
Well, it's also our end of year stream, our Christmas stream. So if you want to go back on anything that happened this year, that's fine too.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything. It's all this all kind of put everything out of my head, and it's a bad note for us to end the year on. But it's also just
Well, I
our
think it's
doomed
been a bit of a
newsletter.
confusing year in many respects. If you're an Anglo, it's been a bit of a confusing year.
Mm.
We finally got rid of the Conservatives, so-called Conservatives, and we got someone even worse in power, which actually didn't really surprise me, to be honest. As much as I detest the Conservative Party, I wouldn't vote Labour if you gave me £1 million, basically. But
As you say that, but 3 months on, do you actually think he is genuinely worse?
I do actually, because of the kangaroo courts, people being sent to prison for over 2 years for tweets and stuff like that. Yeah, I do. I think he is actually worse.
Yeah, I mean, the freezing pensioners is like, it's bad, but also like it's not as bad as mass immigration, which we still have.
Yeah, exactly. If it was like, oh, we can only stop mass immigration by cutting pensioners' heat subsidies, I might say, well, many pensioners would probably say that would be worth doing, but that's not what they're doing,
No. And it's like, okay, yeah, admittedly, I mean, of course, the worst thing about the winter fuel allowance is that this came after a protracted couple of years where energy prices have gone through the roof. So it's like,
Because
actually,
they're pushing for net zero. Let's be clear on this. If they weren't doing that, they wouldn't go through the roof.
If you'd taken the winter fuel allowance away like 5 to 10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But it's a big deal now because it literally costs a fortune to heat a house here now.
Yes.
And if you've got, even the farm thing is survivable. But of course, the kangaroo courts thing is probably the biggest one. Like, it doesn't affect a huge amount of people, but the thing is, as well, is it's also created this weird paradigm where, like, I will tweet something or I'll say something to someone or in an office or out and about wherever. And I sort of think afterwards, I'm like, people have literally gone to prison for saying less than that, which is absurd because they're not particularly outlandish things.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and let us remember that the West, particularly the mainstream media in the West, likes to talk about Vladimir Putin as if he's the second coming of Adolf Hitler. But Russia, which is a much bigger country than Britain with a much larger population, has far less political prisoners than Britain does. Far less.
Yeah.
Starmer has more people locked up than Putin does for merely not agreeing with him.
Yeah. And the thing is, as well, like with the Russia comparison, is that, like, I mean, as I was just saying, with the whole ambiguity of it, like, you kind of know what you're not supposed to be saying in Russia. Whereas as here, like some of those guys, there was one case in particular where a guy went away for basically a very boomer tier Facebook meme where it showed some migrants getting off a boat at Whitehaven and it said, "Come into a town near you." And I mean,
well, that obviously deserves, months and months in prison. Obviously,
yeah, I think he got 18 months or something like that for that. And it's like, I don't actually know an elderly relative that hasn't posted almost that exact same meme.
And I don't know anyone who doesn't think that same thing.
No.
But
And it's like, funny enough as well, it came like a week after Angela Merkel, after Angela Rayner said that these need to be distributed to every town needs to take its fair share. Which, first off, like, there's sort of an implied, there's an unspoken
fair share is zero, but
the unspoken admittance there is that actually these people are a strain and a punishment. But also, like, the meme as distributed after her saying that is just a fact. It just becomes an actual statement of public record. So it is sort of bizarre, and it's just this constant ambiguity surrounding these things. Like, you don't know how the system operates anymore. Is it just that I have to wait until the things I say online or off just happen to catch the ire of of a certain type of police officer or a certain type of government official. You know, I don't know. I mean, I've tried to actually report to a police force statements that were made by certain left-wing activists. One in particular,
But you got
that was
nowhere.
surrounding the Southport thing. Yeah, got no response at all. So, like, again, is it? I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works. I don't know how these people are picked up and other people aren't. And of course, in the aftermath of that Southport thing, there was something that came out recently, which is that the Birmingham City Council, which is a bankrupt city council, like literally financially bankrupt. I shouldn't say literally, but basically financially bankrupt, is offering a grants program to Muslim communities affected, I suppose, emotionally by the Southport, the post Southport riots.
Wow, what a bloody surprise! Aaron, did you have anything to add to what Alman was saying there?
Not really, but well, other than frankly, I wasn't surprised by the crackdown. It's sort of par for the course for the modern way the country's run, pretty much.
Yep, don't disagree. Mitch, anything to add to what Adam was saying there?
Like, I would say, like, in terms of Starmer, I think I'd rather have Starmer in charge than, let's say, someone Boris. Like Boris Johnson, he flooded the country with like a net 1 million people, and there's still sections of a population who still love him because he's still got that
I get
demeanor.
what you're saying about that. I do get what you're saying about that.
Whereas Starmer is just a vicious idiot. Like he's got no political acumen whatsoever, and
I don't think he's got any emotional common sense whatsoever. To be honest, none. Like I don't think he even realizes he's the most hated British Prime Minister ever. You know.
To be fair, there was that one press conference he made where it was like, "Oh well, this was a deliberate experiment by the Boris premiership." So it was like he was trying to pivot, and apparently, if you listen to AI, which he's come out with some really stupid takes this week, apparently this is proof that Starmer's going to put the woke away, and that he's going to deport more. I mean, deport more illegals and tourists, which isn't really hard because how many
they didn't deport anyone basically, but I do have my issues with some of AA's recent takes. I have to say, I really do. But he is an admirer of Tony Blair, who was like one of the people who really, really turned the tourniquet to strangle real British people, and he's an admirer of that man.
Well, that's the thing about someone like Keir Starmer is he is kind of like an heir to Blair in a sense. Like, he's just carry on with the same policies because I mean, like, I think it was Ben Habib who explained it on Multitude, but basically, Tony Blair, he enshrined like human rights stuff from the EU, for example, into our constitution. So someone like Keir Starmer was able to operate the way he did in his legal career, like working pro bono for literal terrorists and murderers and rapists and whatnot, because of Tony Blair's own legal, I don't want to say revolution, but massive, like, he massively 180'd our constitutional settlement to work against us. So, and you got someone AI who says, yeah, to be fair, the Tories have a big part to blame for the mess with, especially something like the gig economy, like the Just Eat and basically and all the takeaway services that employ illegal immigrants. However, the roots of that was set by Tony Blair to begin with. So I always I look more at AI. I just think he's basically just a disgruntled Blairite. He just doesn't like how incompetent our elite are. I think if Tony Blair were to be back in charge and he's all back to the 90s where the elites were more competent and we had more optimism and blah blah blah, IA would probably be in support of it. There's not really that right wing from what I look at him.
No, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I remember AA when he was originally streaming with what's his name, the Welsh dude
How are
who
you?
used to. No.
No, you're
He's
thinking
old.
of Shinobi Yaka, the old dude.
No. Shinobi's
Oh.
fairly based, actually. No, Shinobi's a fairly based dude. No. He used to stream with oh God, who was that guy? He was always going on about the Romans, which
Oh, the Britisher. He wasn't
the
Welsh, was he?
Britisher, yeah, and the Britisher was like absolutely a liberal. Like the Britisher, I'm surprised he's not been cut in half by now for sitting on the fence, you know. But eventually, AA ditched the Britisher because his audience perceived him as being too liberal and normie. But I remember back then, and I watched AA and the Britisher a couple of times, and I thought, well, these guys are way too left wing for me. And I stopped watching them. And then a long time later, like probably, I don't know, 18 months later or something like that, someone said to me, oh no, AA is fairly base now. And this, of course, was in the era when he got rid of the Britisher. And he had D and all these other people on his stream. And yeah, to some degree, AA did appear to be more right wing. Now he seems to be, because he's not doing those long streams anymore of a load of guests, he now seems to be going back to his norm, which, as Mitch was saying, I think is still pretty liberal in many respects.
Well, they desperately want to be like a lot, and this isn't just him. There's a lot of people on the right that do this. They desperately want to partake in that sort of sensible man in the room act, which leftists get to partake in and enjoy quite a lot. And so you end up with these weird positions where they say that, like, oh, the ruling regime isn't left or right; it's centre right or centrist, and which is obviously absurd. Like on its face, you know, you can look at the way that regime bends, what their average ideals are compared to either historical deals or popular ideals today, and it's you know, it's an absolutely absurd position to partake in.
I think Royal Biscuits makes a good point in the chat, because he doesn't do those streams anymore with 3 or 4 guests.
Yeah,
he has got nobody to hold him to account now, and he's drifting back into the center. He is.
Well, people like to hate on D, but D used to really slap him back into place whenever he went on any sort of pro Blair sort of thing. You know, and he'd sit there and he would try and make out that, like, he would fall into. I mean, you see a lot of AA's ideas that he sort of comes to. He kind of echoes from those two, the Troon and the other guy. And so he'll slip into these things,
so-called
like,
Evelyn, yes.
Yeah, so like they do this position, like not to go and talk about American issues, but you saw this a little bit with the US election. So there was instantly this little group on the right that were kind of echoing the ideas that that included, you know, him and some others, that included the idea that, like, Trump was actually, to a large extent, just the regime, and that it was pivoting to a new position. And that's probably not, like, totally unfounded, but of course, like, they then point to all these weird explanations for it, like, oh look, here's a mainstream news article where they actually kind of start to come to terms with the Trump presidency, and this is clearly a top-down thing. It's like, right, but like, there were newspapers in Paris that were coming to terms with Napoleon coming back to power. It didn't mean that Napoleon marching on Paris was like a top-down strategy.
No,
you know,
exactly
it's also just the fact that they're receptive to where power is because they're filthy, cowardly journalists, and they will act up when they think they can, but they'll fall into line when they're actually genuinely quite afraid. And that's the way it is.
Yeah, no, I think you're entirely right, and I totally agree with what you said there. My view on AA is I used to kind of like Unpopular Opinions and some of those shows like that, but they did depend on who he had on as guests. And now, as people have said, as Raw Biscuit said in the chat, the only stream that AA does is that office hours thing or whatever it's called. And he generally does that on his own, and he is going back to these almost the same takes he had when he was streaming with the British, who is a liberal, 100% a liberal. Like he makes Sargon look like he's a reactionary, you know?
Mm.
So there is some truth in that for sure. But yeah. Raw Biscuits makes another good point in the chat, although I want to give a plug actually to Apostolic Majesty, who's got a stream coming up tomorrow with Marcus Furious, the excellent Australian dude, and also History Bro, who's another good dude. I would recommend that stream to people tomorrow. But yeah, Raw Biscuits, I don't think you're wrong about that. And I agree to some degree with what Henry Long is saying here. I think that's to some degree true as well, to be honest. But anyway, that's just my view. Aaron, unless anyone has anything to add to what Adam was just saying. All right. Does anybody have anything to add to what Adam was just saying?
Well, I'd just have a bit about AA to add to, which is I think I've never really trusted him, and I think it's less that he's a Blairite or a liberal, it's just he's a chameleon who changes sort of political outlook, or should I say, flavour of his political outlook, depending on the dominant political events of the day. So that's why he went from being, when he was the British, sort of liberal, and then he went under Johnson more further to the right, and now he's gone back to being sort of effectively Blairite.
Yeah,
I don't think it's anything like grifting or anything like that. It's just he genuinely just changes views, being on the dominant political current of the day.
Yeah, some truth, mate. I think there's a good deal of truth in that. Did you have a first subject for this evening, Aaron?
Yes, it's about the possibility that we're going to have those local elections suspended in May next year.
Oh, yeah. And I noticed that last week. It's our democracy, except when it's not. Okay.
Yeah, I think the thinking behind it, regardless to what Labour claims there is a reasoning, I think the real reason is that they think if they can suspend those elections, they can try and turn things around during 2025 and then go into the elections in 2026 and not suffer as badly as they would do. However, that's not going to work, and so they're pretty much just kicking the can down the road for 2026, 2027, when, with a year of that resentment towards them, Reform is just going to storm in the local elections if they do suspend those elections in 2025.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that for sure. Guys, what do you think about that?
Kent, where I am, is one of the places that is going to get the transformation treatment. Our election is going to be called off. That was due in May, I think. Yeah, I mean, they're going to gerrymander some of it, aren't they? I think some of this as well is going to be like laying down some of the groundwork for this sort of like regional mayoral scheme that I know they really desperately want.
Yeah,
from what
for
I've
sure.
heard about, because it's like your Angela Rayner, who I think Godfrey Bloom said best. Her tongue is like 3 times too big for her mouth, and yeah, it's like she was saying, "Oh, it's devolution." Or something. The thing was, we're going to go from having like smaller councils, where it's like, for example, my area is very rural, and if I'm a house building target for my area got bumped up by like 3 times what it was previously. So if Labour get their way, I'm going to get loads of migrants over my way if the house building program that Labour wants to do goes underway. Another thing is so they're consolidating a lot of councils so that metropolitan councils consolidate over rural. So, for example, West Midlands Metropolitan, which is like Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Walsall, now includes areas like mine, which are a lot more rural, with the whole intent of being, well, West Midlands, for example, Metropolitan is a lot more Labour because, of course, that's where the demographics have been. So you're just going to have a situation where the cities have more domination over the surrounding countryside under this local government transformation that Labour are planning on doing. And they're postponing these elections because, well, as Aaron said, yeah, they're kicking the can down the road because they know they're going to get they know they'll get pasted in, and they don't want to give reform any more momentum they already are getting currently. Which then leads itself to, because I mean, you're, for example, this story about Elon Musk possibly giving like tens of millions over to reform, which I can understand where people are coming from when they say they don't want someone, because Elon Musk he's a fellow traveler for the time being. However, his end goal is not the same as ours. So I can understand that. However, I mean, given some of the donors the Tories and Labour have, there's not really much room to complain. And, you know, but the other thing about it is, regarding these local elections, if it's reckoned that reform could win up to something like 1,000 councillors. That was one hypothesis some people were making like a week ago or something, I can't remember. Some people with reform were hypothesising something like 1,000 councillors, mainly Tory losses, but also Labour losses up north. And that's why they postponed them. But also, it's literally the Labour Party rewarding their client base, i.e., the cities, by giving them more control so that rural voices, like my neck of the woods, get drowned out. And instead, we just get forced to have house building schemes, and everywhere just becomes Milton Keynes.
Yeah, that seems pretty accurate to me, mate.
You see this in there was a particular photo going around on the right a while ago from Birmingham again, I believe, and it was of an old factory that probably manufactured something pretty cool in the past and don't know what. And it looked like a shelled out building. It was obviously just long derelict, but by the state of it, it might as well have been in a war zone. And in front of it was a giant billboard to one of the mayoral candidates for the position of a Northwest mayor. And it said something like vote for me, give a vote for Palestine or something. So it's like even there,
yeah, but it's that Ahmed Yaqub fellow who's
he's a lawyer, isn't he? He was the one that was going to represent those Manchester airport guys.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically like a
mention on the stream.
Yeah, he's basically like just imagine George Galloway, but even more obnoxious and brown. That's the best way to describe that Yaqub fella. Because I think is it true that from what I've heard, this reform have actually succeeded in getting a prosecution against those suspects?
Yes.
I don't know if Yaqub's representing said suspects, but yeah, it looks like reform. And it's kind of an easy win for reform. And I go, so I suppose we'll wait and see what happens with that criminal case with Manchester. But yeah.
I mean, he was going to represent them in their civil case against the police. So I don't know if he'll be representing them as a defense lawyer now.
Is this the Arabians who broke the nose of the policewoman and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thought so.
Yeah, so apparently the news, I'm not sure the exact details, but apparently, although we need to come back to the mayoral thing, but apparently reform has, because of like pressure from like Farage and Tyson, that trying to essentially bring a civil case against these two. I think the CPS has now agreed to actually charge them and the police officer that was suspended has had his suspension lifted.
I would just say, imagine you break the nose of a police officer. Doesn't even really matter that she was a girl, but you break the nose of a police officer and they might not charge you. What the shit is going on there? I mean, come on.
I mean, the police seemed angrier that the video exonerating their own police officer got leaked than they did with an actual police officer being assaulted. You know, and bearing in mind, like earlier this year, it was just before the Notting Hill Carnival. We had a chief of police on LBC, I believe it was, giving an interview where he talked about the previous year's Notting Hill Carnival, and he was going into like how horrified he was and just angry at how badly his police were treated the previous year, and just raging away about this. And it's like, but first off, he wouldn't talk about, you know, who these cases were caused by or anything like that. Or the issue at hand, but and seemingly the police force will come out and essentially throw its own police officers under the bus and get angry when it's denied the privilege of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, that case at the airport, as I say, one of these two Muslim dudes broke the nose of a female cop. All right, which kind of proves to me women shouldn't be cops, but you know. And then a white guy cop had to step in order to subdue the bastard who did it. You know, and he didn't do anything wrong at all, as far as I could see.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, to go back to the mayor thing. You know, I mean, up there, it's an institution that's so heavily controlled just by demographics, that urban demographics, that it is it's just foreign issues and leftism all the way through. It's just the enshrining of decline. And of course, the hope behind this is that if they enshrine more bureaucracies, people that come in after them, because they can see the writing on the wall, won't be able to undo this stuff.
Well, we know that the traditional so-called conservatives never will.
I mean, the question is more, could reform, obviously based on, like, I wasn't here for the whole thing, but I know this was a conversation that we got into, or was gotten into afterwards. Last week. I mean, I can't say definitive. I know there's a lot of people that go, "Oh no, reform can't do it." I can't say definitively. I think it's too far away from any election for us to be able to say that. Reform sometimes goes with the wind a bit. So sometimes, like, we could be calling them cucks today, and then by next week we could all be calling them based. You know, it does vary a lot with them. Which I suppose just comes with being a smaller and more mobile party.
I agree. I saw many people last week on X, on Twitter, saying that Nigel Farage is in favor of mass migration. I'm sorry, I've never seen Nigel Farage say anything that makes him in favor of mass immigration. I haven't seen him say that. I just haven't.
Yeah.
I have issues with Farage and reform myself. I do. I wish Farage was a bit more upfront and a bit more aggressive about this stuff. And I think most British people, including normies, would support him if he was. But I don't see him saying some of the things that some people on the right claim he says. I don't see that.
I think sometimes people kind of they infer stuff into what he said about, like, not supporting mass deportations, and some people get a little carried away with it. You know, I mean, he should. It is a funny one, because it's like, it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, he should just go the whole hog and support mass deportations, and a lot of his own party would agree with it. But of course, he shouldn't really be worried about what his current supporters think. He's got to try and gain more supporters before the next election. That's obviously the big thing. And
yeah. Look,
I mean, obviously,
where I agree with John is John will say, look, it's in the reform contract with the people, whatever they want to call it, that they will deport foreign criminals and illegal immigrants. John will say it's in there.
but we know from
committed
like
to
the
that.
Tory manifesto that it doesn't actually matter what a party writes down.
Exactly, if they don't do it. But
yeah,
but from the point of view of what is said, John is correct. Farage is kind of committed to that, and if he does it, good. But where I lose it a little bit with some people on the right is they'll say, "Oh, because of various things he said about Islam and what have you, people will say, oh no, Farage is not in favor of deportations. He's not in favor of stage 6 of deportations, or is it 6 or 7, something like that. But he is certainly in favor of stage 1 and 2 of them. And if he does stage 1 and 2, that makes him 500% better than any other British politician, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, we were talking about Germany earlier. Like the AfD it's kind of stagnated in its support gains. It's kind of just still supported by the same people it was like 2 years ago. It hasn't really made any more inroads. So it's like, is becoming more radical beneficial as a party? Well, possibly it still is, because we've seen with like this recent car attack in this Christmas market, like Farage and sort of the immediate sort of reform base, because they've made it all about Islam, which is kind of a boomerism. They have to instead justify this guy as being an Islamist, and they have to talk about like Turkey and all this other stuff. And it's like, if they just took a slightly more radical position on this, they would actually be able to maneuver around all of these quite well and turn all of these attacks into gains in support.
I agree. I mean, the counter jihad has got severe limitations. It really does. Totally right, mate. I totally agree on that.
And the thing is, as well, is you need to. It's not good enough just to have something written in a contract or written in a manifesto. You need to make sure that the party sort of structurally has the right sort of people in it that are going to keep that sort of thing going. And it's like John makes the point that, well, you have to join the party then, right, and become active in the inside. And he's right. He's right about that. But of course, what doesn't help is that there are a lot of people who were previously in groups like the Tories and other such things that are jumping ship, and they're jumping to reform.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be allowed to bring their crappy liberal views with them. I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's like the problem with one of the big problems here is, if your reform, as reform stands now, you are going to let those people in because you've already inculcated a culture inside reform where you are willing to hand over details of party members to a communist group for vetting. Whereas, of course, Tory Wets are already vetted, essentially. So
yeah, I mean, but if it was me, of course, and it's not, but if it was, I wouldn't be interested in having Tory Wets joining reform.
Yeah.
The only conservatives I would be interested in would be the driest of dry conservatives,
Yeah, and it's like, like Tim Montgomery, for example. I mean, I was talking to some reform types near my neck of the woods, IRL, who were like, they were chippy about it because, of course, guys are big fish in the Tory pond, so to speak. So I can see that argument. However, the other week he was crying about wanting more Syrian refugees and about that Alan Kurdi kid from like 2015. And you said, thinking, how the hell does this guy join reform when Farage? I mean, look, to be fair, Farage did say he was in favour of refugees, but the only refugees he was in favour of were basically like Syrian Christians, basically. Like, the only ones he let in are Christians. That's the closest thing you've got to Farage basically having any opinion in regards to like Middle Eastern immigration is, we only let the Christians in because the Muslims all hate them or whatever, and so on. But like you got this Tim Montgomery who's just, all you have to do is put before him some sort of sob story, and the guy just spends his time crying about Syrian Sunnis or whatever. And I'm saying, how is this guy meant to be in reform? Like, it's just a bit awkward having him involved in reform when he and Farage seem like chalk and cheese on something like mass immigration. Because like you remember, like 10 years ago, Farage got a bollocking because he said he would not allow HIV-infected immigrants on the NHS, whereas Tim Montgomery is kind of that guy who would get guilt-tripped into accepting that. So how would someone like Tim Montgomery fit in reform? Because if you got him, a guy used to advise Boris Johnson.
Yep,
and that's kind of the role he does. He advises, so he obviously ends the inner circle. I don't know if Farage would allow him into the inner circle, but let's say.
But there is certainly a danger of reform being diluted by like centre left so-called conservatives. There really is a danger of that for sure.
I was talking with what's his name? One of the American YouTubers, a previous Witten, and Radlib. That's who it was, Radlib.
Yeah, Radlib's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was kind of saying about like it's as hard as it is, when you're running a political organization that you want to, because he was talking about because he apparently is I believe his father in the past run a sort of dissident political organization that was like anti-war or some such, and he said that as hard as it is, as much as it seems like you're handicapping yourself, you do ultimately just have to turn around and say no to like the big money that comes your way, because there's a reason. Yeah. There's a reason that those funds have been allowed to be created or exist within the sort of political sphere, and you kind of have to do that. You do kind of have to do that with even if you're, I suppose, reform. I mean, reform's in kind of a good place for us because it's not our only political answer. I kind of see Homeland being eventually 10 years down the line, the Homeland to reform being what UKIP was to the Tories.
Sure.
And as bad as reform will probably be, it's never going to probably be as bad as the Tories. So it's still essentially a net gain to the right.
Totally agree.
But it's I suppose it's just a watch this space and sort of gambit at the moment.
Yeah, no, you didn't say anything I disagreed with that. I mean, I don't know what Mish and Aaron want to say. If anything.
I would just say about the criticism of Farage and reform. A lot of it seems to me to be a bit of the influence of the United States, where because in US politics you can have sort of rapid change and things. People are sort of, partly because of how online people are, they seem to be expecting the same thing to happen in British politics, and it's not going to happen. The change is going to happen, but it's going to be gradually taking place. So as we've seen over the past year, of sort of the media discussing immigration, where they've gone from saying it's ultimately a good thing to people actually discussing the idea of being a bad thing and people having to be deported. And so Farage and Reform are having to work in that sort of situation where they can only go so far because if they go any further, they will get hammered. But they've got to go up to the line so that people can see them there and bring more people on, and then gradually move forward. So it's.
I just think I just question how many British normie people are in favour of mass immigration, because everything I have seen and everything people tell me and people I talk to, everything is that the vast majority of so-called, in air quotes, normie British people have always been against mass immigration. Like going right back to the 1960s.
Well, it depends on how. It's not that question. It's more of a question of, oh, can we assimilate these people? Because it's like, for example, you give that meme about Nick, age 30, who has to deal with all the economic burdens of the regime. If you're on Question Time, like you look at Question Time, Nick, aged 30, is asking Nigel Farage a question about how can we balance our immigration policy so that we also have, not only are we keeping people who are actually skilled, but also having diversity. But that's basically where Nick, age 30, is. He still believes in diversity as a good thing in society.
Diversity is a weakness. It's not a strength. It's a weakness.
Yeah, and that's a problem. That's opinion. That fact is not observed among many normie Brits, shall we say? And it's like at the end of the day, it's after all this, one thing that certainly has to happen is we have to restrict the franchise or something, because after all this, like universal suffrage was a massive mistake when you look at the way people vote in this country.
Yeah, much truth.
Yeah, it's just it's like, for example, you look on Question Time, like there was that one Nigel Farage appearance where it's like you get the old lady who's saying like, oh, she doesn't believe, like she's that's basically where a lot of normies are. They're really slow in realizing the same stuff that we have realized like years ago. So it's like we're 20 years ahead of the average normie, because they advance at a snail's pace while the likes of us are much further ahead, because that's just the way normies are, unfortunately. It's just. So I'm going to say another thing about it, because in America, you can have rapid change because there's only two parties to vote for. And if you hate Kamala Harris, you're going to vote Trump. Whereas over here, it's, you don't like Keir Starmer? Well, you've got the Lib Dems, Tories, Reform, Greens. You've got so many options to vote for if you don't like Keir Starmer. So Farage doesn't have as much leeway as Trump does in terms of a rhetoric. Plus, also Trump's a salesman. I mean, Trump is a guy who talks big with his mouth, but a lot of the stuff he won't deliver on because that's just an edge of American politics. He talks big, but can't deliver a lot of it because he crossed the Rubicon too early. So I think I saw someone on Twitter say the BNP. The problem with the BNP was that they were much too far ahead too soon, which I think that's probably correct. It's like, for example, the stuff I said about Churchill like 20 years ago. We can say now, we can't say 20 years ago, back when the boomers were the main voting demographic. Whereas now that the boomers are starting to die off as a generation, you have a lot more leeway to talk about Churchill, for example. So,
I do often find that this is where a lot of the anti-Farage stuff comes from as well. Like, he's been very consistent that in pointing out that his political strategy is never getting too far ahead of public sentiment. It's just like leading it along a little bit. And people, and of course, he doesn't always get it right. He isn't going to, but people kind of misinterpret that in all sorts of ways. But it is. I mean, I don't like to partake in too much normie hate, but it is mind. It's just absolutely mind numbing. If you're in an office and you listen to these people talk, and it's just so much of their conversations is just regurgitating newspaper headlines at one another. And it's like every single conversation is just the same. Like, one person opens with one line, someone else comes in with this absolute corker that they think is really edgy, but it's just, it's from the Guardian instead of the Times, and back and forth they go. And it is really sad, but they will. It's just kind of like a weird dance. It's like a tribal dance that that people have to partake in.
Yeah, good point. All right, guys. Because this is our last stream of 2024, I thought what I would do before we close is ask people what are their biggest hopes and biggest fears for 2025, particularly in terms of Britain, but I mean also more widely. And I don't know who wants to start us off, but anyone can start us off.
I'm drawing a blank.
Like I say, biggest hopes, what you hope will happen in 2025, and also maybe what you fear might happen in 2025.
Are we doing like fantasy football where it's like the most outlandish thing possible? Or are we going for something realistic?
I would prefer to go for something realistic, but if you want to do outlandish as well, you can.
God, what can I say that is as it is not shooting for the stars that is probably still going to disappoint me. I would like to see in 2025
Peter Whitaker in the chat is saying, is the British snap election too much to hope for?
Yeah, probably. I mean, okay, I'm going to go for a really, really, really minor one. I would actually like to see Reform surpass Labour in sort of polling by 3 to 4 points. Not that I have some massive love or hope for them, but just I think that would be a really good place for a good indicator of a sort of slightly more positive direction in public sentiment. But
totally agree with you, mate. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Raw Biscuits in the chat is saying that his biggest fear is Starmer tying the British to the EU without any of the benefits. I think there is a strong chance he will try and do that.
But what would tying us to the EU without freedom of movement mean in like real terms?
Oh, I think it would mostly be tying us into the EU military side of things and some of the customs union stuff. But, the point is we've never left many of those things anyway, because when Boris Johnson said, oh, let's get Brexit done, he had no intention of doing Brexit. He had intention of doing Brexit in name only, which is what he did. So,
And also bringing in enormous amounts of third world immigrants as a sort of punishment to the people for having ideas of their own.
Yeah,
for once in their life.
Yeah, absolutely right. But I mean, I always thought this, and I'll be honest with you, when Nigel Farage stood down the Brexit Party candidates in that election, I think it was a mistake. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I'm going to start disagreeing with you on this, because I just think Brexit has largely been a failure, to be honest. Because I mean, I think Atterman was right when he said I think it was right when he said you voted Remain basically because you saw that we were just going to get loads of brown people imported over. So, and it's like Alistair Campbell was saying the same on the Question Time. He was saying, he wants to go back to the days when 80% of our immigration was like Slovak baristas and Polish plumbers, as opposed to third world immigration from Pakistan or whatever.
Yeah.
Or how about we stop immigration from anywhere? That would be kind of cool, I reckon. But,
I mean, like the Remainers recently have actually really kind of made me resent ever voting Remain, because now they do this weird thing where they sort of laugh at Brexiteers and go, haha, yeah, but actually you just didn't realize what you were voting for, and actually a vote for Brexit was a vote for more immigration. It's like, okay, so you're anti-immigration then? Oh, well, no. Okay, so what was the point in this conversation? And it's just that same fucking line of questioning and line of discussion over and over and over again, without any sort of self-awareness by themselves. It's just deranged. They just appear like they're absolute loons.
I think Brexit's been a failure, but I don't think it's been a failure because the British people voted for Brexit. It's been a failure because the British elites, in air quotes, didn't want it to succeed. That's why.
But of course, that's the problem with all referendums, though, isn't it? Is that you're not clearing out the actual elite that made that status quo the status quo to begin with.
I mean, if we get a reform government, one of the litmus tests to me will be you've got to see wholesale sackings in the civil service.
Yeah, that's one problem with reform is that they don't really have they don't really have much of a plan on that sort of things, which they really could start doing.
There's got to
in the
be
next year or so.
50% of the British civil service, 50% of them, and I use
That's
the civil
generous.
service.
I'd say 80.
Yeah, but hang on, I'm trying to talk practical politics here rather than what I'd like 100% of them to be sacked. Well, that's not going to happen. But I'd like at least 50% of them to be sacked. And when I say the civil service, I don't just mean the official civil service. I mean NHS, cops, military, MOD, everybody. You need 50% of them gone.
Yeah, I think the only issue with that, though, is that because they're not going to take any shrinkage, are they? Like anything more than a tiny little 2% downsizing somewhere under some.
Yeah, well, that's why you got to stack 50% of them out of it.
Yeah, but this is the problem. If you gained the
and
power,
then maybe build them up to maybe 70% of what they are.
If you gained the power to get rid of 50% of them, then you've already gained the power to just get rid of all of them. This is kind of the issue, like I was saying earlier, with oh shit, what was I saying? With the issue I was saying earlier with with whether reform was actually tough enough to be the person that winds back like the mayoral system they want to bring in. They're probably not. It'll probably be whoever comes after them. But I mean, it could also just be a vehicle for that if the right people took it over. But ultimately, it won't actually keep out what they actually think is coming. They obviously analyze their own systems of power via the means that they run it under.
If you're going to do any good as a new party coming in that wants to do some sort of renewal for Britain, which is what reforms say they want to do, you have got to have pretty hefty redundancies in the civil service.
Well, I mean, at the height of the empire, the civil service was 45,000 people. Running the entire empire. Yeah, now it's close to 500,000 people, and it just runs this country, and it runs it like shit.
Yeah,
it's absolutely
runs it into the ground, basically.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, to me that's going to be a litmus test if we get a reform government by 2029, which I hope we do. That's going to be my litmus test for them, alongside, of course, they really do net zero immigration, which I think is absolutely vital, and alongside deporting illegal immigrants, which is all of these people coming from France, and also all foreign criminals. You commit a serious crime and you're not a British citizen, you should be deported.
Yeah, I mean, if or when reform can get elected, as soon as a party like that gets elected, essentially there's a gauntlet that's thrown down, and they either immediately turn into the new Tory party, or they call a lot of bluffs and they essentially put a lot of government departments to the sword. There's no sort of in between in that.
Absolutely.
Because it's just what you have to do to survive when you're an outer party getting into the system,
and to increase your support. Like if they get in, people will expect to see change.
Yeah, that's where Rupert Lowe and others like him will be most needed, because another thing is the thing about Brexit really is the fact is we're not big enough to be sovereign by ourselves. So it's like we got a choice of, okay, do we go with the Americans or do we go with the Europeans? Because Kanzuk, I just don't see possible. Like Canada, for example, I think is so far gone because they're going to become minority white in the next 10 years.
Kanzuk will only work if you get based governments in all of those nations, which is a big call.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like Canada, I think their demographics are so far gone, but I don't think it's going to happen in Canada. Australia, I don't know if it's going to, because I mean, Pauline Hanson, apparently, she's so disappointing that I've seen all the Australian nationalists just say they want her gone. And you've got New Zealand. Yeah, they're doing all right, New Zealand, in terms of Winston Peters being Deputy Prime Minister and everything, but it's not enough. So they've literally got a position where Kanzok is pretty much it can't happen because the Americans will not allow it to be independent from them. So for Kanzuk, you'd have to have the Americans either going isolationist or disempowered as an empire, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. So, or pragmatically, as well, I would say I think the best thing would to ally more with Europe, because I think America's more a danger to our sovereignty at this point, in my opinion, than the EU. Or rather, like Europeans in general, I should say, not the EU, because the EU are pretty terrible. But because it's like, for example, AA and that kind of clique of the right, they are right in the sense of being suspicious of Musk, because you got Musk and a lot of people around Trump who are based on this opinion of, oh, we just want multiracial working class conservatism. And given that it's like the old saying goes, America sneezes and we catch a cold. How much of that Republican ideology, like Matt Gaetz and JD Vance support, how much of that is going to be inserted into politics because of American influence? Like, I just see the American influence as being one of the main reasons we miss mess. It's like, so I'm just of that opinion where whatever decouples us from the Americans is a net good, even if it means we have to be a bit more pally with the Europeans, who traditionally we've not really been with in the same way we have with America. Although with America, it's like Churchill was to our detriment. So that's why Brexit, I don't see anyone who's success.
Who are you going to be pally with, Mitch? You're talking about the German guy or the French dude or the actual scumbags in charge in Brussels? I mean, who?
Yeah, this is one thing. Whether we're between a rock and a hard place. It's like you got the Americans, even under Trump, they're just going to be offering like right-wing version of globalism. So it's not going to be 100% great for us if we go on board with America and carry on with this Atlanticism. But at the same time, Europe just doesn't have any fight in it at the moment. Like you got the German AfD.
I mean, the thing is that Macron and the German Chancellor and all of the EU leaders are just as much under the heel of the GAE as anyone in Britain is.
Yeah, but I'm talking about it's like you talk about Kanzuk possibly being based or whatever, and I go, I don't think. I think there's more like more chance of it based in Europe happening.
I only say Kanzuk would only work if you had base governments in Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. We don't have base governments in any of those countries. So at the moment, it's a non-entity,
Yeah, and I think there's more chance of base Europe coming about than base Kanzuk, because I think
it ain't there Canada. But it's not there now.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like we're between a rock and a hard place. It's like, I mean, Europe is pretty much being castrated by what the American Empire's done to them, and we kind of have to be on board with the American Empire because there's no one else. I mean, we can't ally with the Russians because we've also burnt our bridges with them, whatever bridges we had to begin with. So it's like we're saddled with the Americans, but even America under Trump is not exactly perfect for Europe because, I mean, because Trump, yeah, he's Anglophilic, and I've got no real problem with Trump in terms of foreign policy, but beyond him, the MAGA-tard movement, they hate this side of the Atlantic, they hate Britain, they hate Europe. I just don't think there's much of a long-term future between us and the Americans. That's the main problem with Brexit.
I really don't know about that. I'm trying to restrict what we are hoping for the next year rather than the next decade. But
Yeah, I will say this in terms of hope. I mean, apparently there's rumours flying about that the Labour Party, half the Labour Party, wanted to depose Keir Starmer because their poll ratings are crap.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, which if that happens, they're going to be speedrunning their own demise. More than the Tories did with Boris Johnson, where they turfed out Boris Johnson after like, was it 2 years? Or actually 3 years of him being in charge. They're going to get rid of Keir Starmer.
That's one of the things I hope for, is that by the end of this year, we're within sight of a general election. That's one of the things I'm like. One of my realistic hopes is that by the end of this year, Labour is in so much trouble that we can actually see an election on the horizon.
The problem is with that is Reform won't be winning the next general election anytime soon. It'll have to be a few years before that happens, because as I don't know if you saw what I don't know if you caught of what Godfrey Bloom had to say about Reform, but
no, I haven't watched that yet.
Basically, he says Reform they're too populist, they're too in board with the Westminster establishment at times, and he doesn't feel that. And he feels like, for example, because Ben Habib has left, he feels that Reform are bleeding away some of their best talent. And basically, it's becoming too much of a one-man band. It's not becoming massively ideological. It's not setting down the roots required for it to supplant the Tories. Instead, they just feel like, instead of Godfrey Bloom, is only opinion where he feels like there's more chance of Nigel Farage being subsumed into the Tory party than him replacing the Tories.
I don't know what you say about that. That's possible. I don't think it's very likely, but it is possible. Yeah. I don't think that's very likely myself. I think Farage is head and shoulders above anyone in the Tory party, and certainly head and shoulders way above their Nigerian leader. But I mean, that's just me.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, if you go for current polling, Labour's losing, but the Tories aren't winning either, so we're just going to get a hung Parliament. And between the Tories and Reform, they're not going to win, and there's not enough seats between anyone really. There's not enough seats between Tories and Reform. Neither is there enough seats for Labour, Liberal Democrats, Labour, and the Greens. So it's just going to be massive chaos if we were to have a general election tomorrow, going off about the seat allocation, going off the voting trends.
Maybe. Ben Gale is saying, what do you think about our cursed possible Reform Tory coalition government? I would hate that idea. I would really hate that idea. I think it would be the death of Reform if they do it. But that's just me.
Yeah, that'd be a terrible idea.
Yeah, I really think that would be the worst possible outcome, would be a Conservative Reform government.
I don't think they would do that, though.
I hope not. I hope not, Alan. Aaron, what do you think, mate? You haven't said anything for a while.
Well, on that idea of a Tory Reform coalition, I don't think that's likely. So you might get a Tory minority government with Reform doing a supply and confidence agreement at some point, but that's, I think, as far as it would go.
Hopefully.
Yeah. On the sort of greatest fears, greatest hopes for next year. My greatest fear for next year, and one that I think is a real possibility, is that the economy will go through the floor, given what's the current budget.
Yep. I don't even think that's a fear. I think it's an almost certainty, to be honest.
I mean, I work for a very small business. We've only got about 15 employees, and the NI changes alone is the equivalent of about 2 people's salary a month extra.
Which is a lot for a small business.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we turned profitable this year, so we'll be fine. But it also just means we can't expand, we can't go any further, not yet anyway. And it's like, for what? Okay, yeah, sure. It's not going to put us out of business. We'll still be fine. But it's like, what is that paying for? Oh, the vital services, the police and the fire. No, it isn't. It pays for migrant hotels, social housing for immigrants, and fat women with fibromyalgia, and
Yeah.
you know, and all the other various client groups and signs of decline and decay.
Well, we've all heard about this so-called black hole in the British finances, but it hasn't stopped the Starmer Labour government from giving away billions and billions of British taxpayers' money to the corrupt regime in Ukraine. It hasn't stopped Starmer and the Labour government from giving away billions of British taxpayers' money to Mauritius to take over a British territory in the Indian Ocean. Like, not only are they giving it away, they're going to pay them to take it. And it's not stopped Starmer and the Labour government from giving away millions and millions of British taxpayers' money to assorted Islamists in Syria. It's not, so the black hole ain't that big, obviously. You know, it's big enough that we'll freeze pensioners to death and we'll try and destroy British farming families, but it's not big enough to stop all those huge, enormous payouts, which are much bigger than the amount of money that they save by making your granny freeze to death.
I did actually have a list of the 22 billion black hole as can be seen in funding elsewhere. I don't know what I've done with it, but like basically just in some of like just the most ridiculous of like immigration funding, you can find that 22 billion quite easily.
Yeah. Oh, look, if you arrive in Britain on a dinghy and you chuck your passport in the English Channel, which most of them do, you get a free mobile phone, you get free accommodation, you get free food, you get free health service, and you get free welfare payments. And that is vastly more money than is being spent on the winter fuel supplement for pensioners who paid tax all their lives. Vastly more money.
Yeah,
they're just lying, basically, as politicians generally do, of course.
and it isn't even a new thing either. Like a lot of this goes back like decades as well.
Yep. I mean, you look at the National Health Service, and the most expensive thing humans have ever made is the International Space Station, and less than a year's funding for the NHS would pay for the International Space Station.
Well, I mean, you say about the International Space Station. I mean, we had that story this week, right? About where that couple who went up on the International Space Station have been told they got to stay up there till April because they can't get them back. I mean, NASA's basically had to admit that they don't have the means to decommission it anymore, so they're going to have to pay like Elon Musk like $850 million to
I mean, look,
out of the sky.
they've also been using the Russians for ages to take stuff up there, which of course they can't do at the moment because of the Ukraine bullshit. You know, but that will end soon enough because Ukraine are just going to lose that war. But I mean, everyone's been able to see that for a long time with the slightest common sense. But
I mean, that was put up when I was in primary school. The International Space Station. So yeah, it's been up there for a long time. But even then, you know, just in that quarter of a century, you know, the amount of decline that's taken place. I mean, there was a report from I think 2018 where they admitted that like the same departments sort of adjacent to that who managed the firing of the US nuclear arsenal are basically incapable of firing any of that stuff.
Yeah, it's true. Any final points, anybody? We seem to have lost Mitch. Hopefully he'll come back. But any final points, Aaron?
I'd just say that my greatest hope, well, I've got two. One of which I think is a certainty that the SNP will be out on the arses in the next Scottish parliamentary elections, which is good all round. And the second one is that, as it's already been mentioned, there's Labour talk about trying to replace Keir Starmer. I think what would be better for us is the more likely scenario of them trying to remove him and them failing, and then you have effectively a three-way civil war inside the Labour Party between Starmer's people, effectively the Blairites, who would try and replace him, and then they sort of rump at the Corbynites, and that these three would be at each other's throats for the rest of the Parliament and destroy the Labour Party from inside out.
Hopefully. Yep, totally agree. I do. I totally agree with that. Aaron, I think that's a good point. It's certainly what I hope for. And, you know, Labour prime ministers generally don't go quietly. So the chances are Starmer will hang in there as long as he possibly can, you know. So, yeah. And anything else from anybody? Mitch, did you have anything? We were just, Aaron was just saying he hopes there's an internal civil war in Labour, which I certainly agree with.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, in terms of the economy going bust, I mean, I don't know if you saw. I think it was on Politics UK. I think Max Tempers or someone like that, who said, like, there are more households in the UK taking benefits than households paying tax. So you got only a minority of the population at this point are actually productive, and the entire situation is just unsustainable. And apparently, Rupert Lowe, he's trying to get. I forget. I don't know if it was to do with criminality or benefits, but basically, he was trying to get some. But he got his way on some of the data being released about illegal immigrants as well as legal migrants. How much? I don't know if it was welfare they take or if it was criminality amongst them, but it looks like Rupert Lowe might get some statistics released on that.
That'd be good.
I think. Yeah, and I mean, the whole, I don't know, the greatest fear is basically Labour coming up with. I mean, to be fair, we're going to react to it as it comes through. But I mean, what more ways can Labour do to destroy the country? So really destroy the economy.
Well, they're pretty original in that they do come up with stuff that we don't even suspect. I mean, you know, every time you think Keir Starmer can't be more anti-Anglo-Celtic British and Labour can't be more anti-Anglo-Celtic British, they come up with a new way to be anti-Anglo-Celtic British. You know, there's never been a government that so obviously hates the real people of the country.
I mean, this is where I actually prefer Keir Starmer being in charge because he's just so open about it, but he's also so stupid about it that it just activates, like, it just gets everyone irked off about it, and it just fuels, quote unquote, the norm is our way. Whereas someone like Boris being in charge, he's able to just de-weaponize any sort of anger against him by just using usual Churchillian swagger and whatnot. It disarms people's suspicions. So that's my. So in a way, I'm kind of hopeful that we'll get a more right-wing government next time round because of how terrible Starmer is. And the Labour Party, the problem with the Labour Party is a lot of their MPs, like such as some Labour Party MPs in my neck of the woods, they're new Labour MPs. They're not going to get rid of Starmer. You get some, like Diane Abbott, for example, they might try and chuck him out, but they'll fail, as Alan will say. And Labour will have a civil war. I mean, you got Corbyn, for example. Apparently, he's trying to form up his own party, which, if that happens, that's Labour screwed. Like, that's Labour
good luck
really
to him.
entering.
Good luck to him. That will split the Labour vote. Good.
Yeah, I think more people would vote Corbyn than vote Starmer at this point.
Possibly, but that wouldn't work. Since I detest both of them, I'm sure that would be a good thing because it will just split their vote.
Yeah, so I think it's Peter Hitchens who said he thinks that Corbyn is less of a danger than Starmer, which I think the thing about Corbyn, what about he's like Corbyn was one of those wishy-washy socialist types. He's not like someone like Keir Starmer who's a lot more sociopathic. So Corbyn is just a retard more than being. He's harmful, but he isn't harmful consciously. I don't think. I could be wrong, but
I will say though that nowadays I think Musk taking over X probably helped this along, but nowadays they've gotten very good at just ignoring dissent. Like, you know, they used to believe their own bullshit to the extent that they actually thought that a lot of them did actually think that, like, if the public were in uproar at stuff they were doing, that it actually harmed them in some way. And the only people that were largely unaffected to this was like Blair, you know, and people in that sort of sphere. But now a lot of them, even on the more radical ends, have gotten quite used to actually the idea that they can just ignore public dissent. So I don't know how that would change that that sort of paradigm going forward. If someone like Corbyn could actually end up being significantly more harmful, if he
I think he would certainly draw votes off the Labour Party. That's for sure. And anything which weakens the Labour Party, I think is good. You see, I absolutely detest the so-called Conservatives who don't conserve anything and haven't done for many, many, many years. But I think the Labour Party are equally bad. You know, both of them, they're a uni-party. The Labour Party and the so-called Conservatives are a uni-party. They both need to go. And part of that uni-party is also the Lib Dems and the Greens. They're all a uni-party, pretty much. And they've all got to go, basically. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a hope for, like, I don't know, 5 years' time of it. It's like the stars are aligning more towards a Farage premiership. I mean, you get some people who say don't get ahead of ourselves, because, you know, same people will say the same about Corbyn, because I think Corbyn had a lot of social media traction and whatnot, like Farage currently has, and so on. But I generally think the atmosphere in the country at large is literally just one of reform winning big.
Yeah, Starmer and Labour are hated. And I think most people have moved past the so-called Conservatives and their Nigerian leader. I just think people have moved past them.
I do not underestimate the Tories, is what I would say about that one, because, the Tories have largely been absent from major headlines recently, but the Tory party has survived for a long time, and I think the Labour Party has to get destroyed by the looks of it before Tories.
I think they made a huge mistake electing a Nigerian as their leader. I really do. A Nigerian woman as their leader, a big mistake.
Well, I will say, if Jenrick were to defect to reform, for example, hypothetically, now, I don't really have much of an opinion on that, because I don't even know if he's actually genuine in terms of his anti-immigration rhetoric. But if he were to make the move to reform, that's Tories really being dead at that point, because everyone to the right, everyone on the right has no one to vote for but Farage at that point, because at least someone like Jenrick is kind of like Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know, they say some right-wing based things, and that gets right-wing people to vote Tory, as I have done for years, which is the main reason I hate someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, because he.
These days, Mitch, they tend to be very elderly people that are still voting for the Conservatives.
Well, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson are in their 50s, so.
No, I'm talking about I'm talking about the people who vote for them. They tend to be like in their late 60s plus, basically.
Yeah, but those people will vote Tory until the day they die. They're not going to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Were to disappear.
Yeah. Well, that's where reform is getting quite a lot of younger people supporting them. That's a positive, I think.
Yeah, it's I mean, as revealed in America, it's basically Trump got voted in by a coalition of Gen Xers and Zoomers. I imagine the same dynamic would probably work for reform. It's basically Gen Xers and Zoomers, because it's like, you know, Gen Xers. If you listen to Dan on Lotus Eaters, I think he's correct on this, where it says Gen Xers just want to be left alone, and that's where they like someone like Farage, because he's got that, you know, beer drinking, cigarette smoking kind of demeanor. And then the Zoomers, like my generation, well, we get nothing from the system as it exists. So why not vote for fraud? Is what a lot of people are thinking.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, guys, we're going to wind this up in a minute. Does anyone have anything they would like to plug? I'll start with Aaron. Aaron, would you want to plug your channel, mate?
Yes, I've got a couple of things coming up this week. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a live stream where I'm going to be discussing 3 of M.R. James's ghost stories. And then on Christmas Eve, I'm going to be doing a live stream just to discuss. It'll be Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And then, of course, next Sunday, I think it is, I'll be on a stream on my channel with Duke to discuss the Jameson raid in 1895.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, mate. That'll be quite interesting in South Africa in 1895. And your channel is Aaron Hook, isn't it?
Yeah, or you put in Aaron James Hook, comes up as well.
Okay, but I'll put a link below the stream later on anyway, Aaron. Adam and Mitch, anything you wanted to plug before we stop?
No, nothing personal. I've been reading Imperium Press's The Cultured Thug Handbook this week. I recommend that actually. And
someone else recommended that.
Yeah, it's good. If you've read a lot of the right-wing source material, it's all stuff we've already covered. But it's good to read Mike from Imperium Press's sort of like construction of this into a he's a bit paganistic and stuff, which obviously I'm not totally with, but it's still a great book, great little book. And I've been reading that whilst enjoying smoking Peterson's Dulux Navy rolls. So. Yeah, that's my shilling.
Fair enough, man. Anything you wanted to plug, Mitch?
No, not for me.
All right, guys. I will just say to everybody, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, obviously, to everyone who watches these streams. We will be back on the 5th of January for our first stream of 2024. So yeah, after the new year, and I'm going to play us out of a tune if it works. Let's see if I can do it.
Well, at least setting up, I'll just say Merry Christmas to everyone in chat. Have a Happy New Year. May Father Christmas keep you on the good boy list and deliver you everything you hope for, but not quite yet anything that based. Maybe next year.
Try to imagine a house that's full of cold. Try to imagine being 80 years old. That's where I'll be since care left me. I wish tears could heat my home. What can I do without fuel? I've got no place to go. It'll be
Oh, using all that bandwidth nuked his computer, I think.
Well, as Duke's disappeared from me, so I will also say Happy Christmas and a Merry New Year, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, it's back.
Yeah.
You there, Duke?
All right.
so cold without fuel at home this Christmas.
We inherited a situation where there was a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
Do you remember last year when Rishi was here? We never thought there'd be an end. And I remember looking at you then, and I remember thinking that next Christmas things won't be this bad for us. But darling, this year things are even worse. And we really need warmth. And two-tier Kier doesn't care at all. It'll be freezing this Christmas without fuel at home. It'll be freezing this Christmas while Keir Starmer's warm. It'll be cold, so cold without fuel at home this Christmas. Merry Christmas, Keir. I hope you can sleep at night.
Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, that's the #1 song in Britain this Christmas. And for reasons best known to themselves, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation will not even play it, even though it's the #1 song in Britain.
Well, it's not. It's only a #1 on iTunes download chart, but
iTunes and downloads, yeah, which is the main
Yeah.
chart now. I mean, like, people don't buy music anymore in terms of physical copies, you know. So which is why I don't know if you remember, but I remember Top of the Pops back in the day, you know, which was also from the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, where we could watch Jimmy Savile week after week, because you know he was a good guy. If you weren't a child, but yeah. So yeah, but it's basically the #1 song in the UK, and the BBC, the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, will not play it. What a surprise! Because of course they fully support Sir Keir Starmer and his globalist elites. Anyway, guys, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see you in the new year. So go well and don't let the bastards grind you down.